And so we'll kind of dive back into the clinical side of things. If the webinar titled is Simplifying the Shoulder, and on your website, Simple Advice, that is like assuming to some extent that we tend to overcomplicate things in clinic. Would you, before I go any further, would you agree with that statement as just a general broad umbrella, like we overcomplicate shit all the time?
Absolutely, mate. Physios overcomplicate everything. We overcomplicate our advice, our education, our treatments, and of course our rehab. We basically overcomplicate what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, a couple of things I think is just the trouble is we live in a society nowadays and work in a profession that just doesn't value or appreciate simplicity. No one likes to do or explain things simply anymore. It's not the way of the world. Everything has to be detailed and overcomplicated. And, and I think there's that problem with our profession as well, is that everybody's trying to appear smarter and cleverer than the next person. And so you just have this snowballing effect of everybody trying to say something a little bit more different, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more in depth, just to be a bit more unique and to stand out in this sort of noisy sort of world that we're living in now with social media. And I think that's why physios tend to overcomplicate and overconflate what they do. And they start to, get themselves tied up in all sorts of knots and end up going down some wormholes. And I find it a little bit frustrating, and it's a bit sad, really. I mean, I don't blame physios for doing it. It's just, I think it's the situation and the society that we're in. But it is quite sad and embarrassing at times. And I think, I'm trying as best as I can to say, like, come on, guys, you don't have to go down this pathway. Let's stick to the simple stuff. But again, there are barriers with simplification and simplicity. I mean, the biggest one, I think, is physios' egos and elitism and their narcissism. They just don't like to do things simplistically. They don't like to explain things simplistically. They have inadequacy issues and inferiority complexes, I think. They don't value what they can do and their position in the healthcare system. I think a lot of physios find themselves or feel themselves subservient to surgeons and doctors and even other therapists. And again, that's another reason why I think they overcomplicate and over-exaggerate what they do and how they do it, rather than just trying to be a bit more rational about things. So, yeah, I mean, one of the perfect examples, and I hope I don't offend you with this, Quinn, is that I noticed that one of the things that I see as a perfect example of physiotherapists overcomplicating things is the fact in the USA now, all physios call themselves doctors. What,
Yeah.
What the fuck is all that about?
Well, I as you're talking, I'm thinking like that exact thing. So I think the doctor title is, and it's just the degree, I think, as we're getting, because over here in the States, we have this thing that's changing the laws called direct access, meaning that people can actually come to see a physio straight away without having to go to a physician first to get a referral. And so the big thing is like, well, okay, so if you're going to be a first line defender, then you need to have a quote unquote doctoral education. But what exactly does that mean? Does that mean our physio diagnoses are nebulous at best? And so like, as you were talking, you mentioned doctors and surgeons, and yeah, we feel kind of like subservient, but then we want to be what we are doctors, or we're still like healthcare professionals. So then we want to be above others like strength and conditioning specialists. So it's like what you were saying, we have to try to make things up to feel like we're on that level. And people ask me sometimes, they're like, what's it, because they see me practice, quote unquote practice, or quote unquote treat people, and it's basically just strength and conditioning. And then so they ask me, well, what do you do that's different than a strength and conditioning coach? And I scratch my head, I'm like, nothing. I don't really have an answer.
Yeah. I get that a lot, but I do think we are different. I think, the education that we get gives us a better understanding, obviously, of pathology. Strength and conditioning coaches don't get that. I didn't get that as my strength and conditioning training. And again, the biggest difference is pain. We work with people that are in pain, that are scared, that are confused, that have got other psychosocial factors going on. Strength and conditioning coaches most often don't. They have other psychosocial issues to work with, their anxieties and their athletes, other problems, but they don't have the same thing as it does as we do with physios with pain. So yeah, although from the outside it can look like we're doing exactly the same thing, we are doing things differently with nuances behind it with regards to our different populations.